when you should create a grid, you just set the display to grid. That creates a grid for you. And if you don't do anything else, well, then you will get a 1-column grid. So let's try this. And now I'm going to use the CodePen site. But if you prefer something else, then feel free to use anything that you want. But what I would like to do is that I would like to go there, and we are supposed to create a container element with 4 items, and we should set the display to grid for the container and see what happens. So let's go to the CodePen and click here to create a new pan. And then in the HTML field, well, then we should have maybe a section. And now I'm going to use the Emmet version here. So I write section, and then I write maybe article. And I would like to have 4 of those. And then within that one, I would like to place just the number like this. So now we have 4 articles. And now if I'm going maybe down here, and maybe we can say that the article, let's add a little bit of background and make it pink maybe. And then I'm going for the section, and that should now have a display of grid. And as you can see, there is nothing that changes the layout in this way, because as I said, we get a 1-column grid if we don't specify anything else. So how do we then specify columns? Well, there is an attribute called grid template columns. So we can use that to add as many columns as we like, and we can set them in any size we want. You can use percentage, you can use pixels, and you can use ems and whatever. So then again, if you have more items than columns, well, then the grid will create new rows automatically. So let's try this. Add 1 column to the container, and then add another one, and then yet another one, and see what happens. And you can also try a little bit different sizes. So let's go back here, and let's add the grid template columns, and then we could say that the first one should be 20%. And now you see that they end here. And maybe if we do like this also, they set this background to light green maybe. And now we can see that the grid actually spans the full width, but the column that we set up spans the first 20%. Then we can add another column that is 10 ems maybe to get another one. And now we see that we have 2 columns, but also 2 rows, because we had 4 items. And I can continue and say then I should have, I don't know, 5 centimeters like this. And now I have 3 columns. And of course, when I drag this one, we can see that the first column varies in size because we have set that to percentage. So as you can see, I can mix and match. I can say that this one should be 150 pixels. There is nothing stopping me from doing kind of whatever in the size here. So grid template columns we use to add columns. If I would like to add rows, well, then I also have grid template rows, and that works in the same way as the grid template columns. But now, as you probably know, if you've done any web design, using percentage on the height, well, that of course depends on the grid. So to see this one, we probably need to set a specific height for the grid. First, ensure that we have 2 columns. So let's remove this one, and then let's add a grid template row. And let's say that the first one should be 100 pixels. And now you see that the first row spans 100 pixels. And then if I now add another row and say that that should be 20%, well, then it got a little bit higher in some way. Because now it is 20% of the full width, or the full height, I should say. But we usually don't have that. So let's say that this one should be 10 viewport height, maybe. And then it will vary depending on the height of the viewport. So what happens if I add yet another row here of 50 pixels? Well, it actually adds that row into the grid. So the grid will now take up the full space it needs to fit all the rows. But as you see, I have no more items. But then if I do like this, then what will happen then if I remove one column? Well, then it actually needs 4 rows, but the last row has kind of no settings for the size. So that means that it will take up as much space as needed. Now we have a basic understanding on how to create a grid. So now we can create columns and we can create rows. And then we will continue and using the grid in a little bit more advanced way in the next video.